Davis, you're recognized for 5 minutes. I'm sure you got questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You were correct. I wish I had something like a big portrait to have Mr. Graves drag his knuckles over here and hold it for me, but
Well, at least the House pictures got bigger than the Senate as we went on.
we are the House. Thank you very much, Secretary Darcy and Administrator McCarthy, for being here today. As this hearing about WOTUS, you've heard a lot about the impact or possible impact of the proposed rule on our ag community, and I think there's really a trust gap between both your agencies and our farmers, and that's why one of the things I advocated for in the Farm Bill was to include agriculture to have a seat at the table as part of your EPA Science Advisory Board. In my view, it's been a slow rollout. Currently, I know applications are being accepted till March 30th. And as you review the candidates, I want to make it very loud and clear that our intent in negotiating this bipartisan provision was to have voices on this committee that didn't only have scientific expertise, but also real-life experience with production agriculture. So having voices on this committee with the real-world experience can help bridge this trust gap. Can I have your commitment that you'll honor our congressional intent by ensuring that members of this committee will be part of production agriculture?
That's me.
Yes.
I certainly will do the best and as expeditiously as I can to meet what Congress has advised us we should do. And I would look forward to the establishment of this committee so that early on in every process we have an ability to hear what these informed stakeholders have to say.
Well, thank you. Well, this is, as the author of that provision, I mean, I am clearly stating for the record what our intent is to make sure that we have not just scientists, but people involved in production agriculture. So thank you.
But before you leave, I want to make sure that you know that we did get a request from our ag stakeholders to extend the time for nomination by 60 days. So,
Yes.
so I don't want you to think we're being inconsistent in my commitment to move
I'm not
forward.
complaining about the
Okay.
process. I just
Okay.
want you to know the intent of what the result could and should be. Secondly, I sent a letter to your agency on January 22nd in regards to the Mahomet Aquifer and its proposed designation to be considered a sole source aquifer. That aquifer in central Illinois actually serves over 700,000 people. And I will submit this letter to you and your staff to make sure your eyes see this. And I'd like to get an update from you even after this hearing as to when we could expect a decision on this very important issue to my constituents.
I'm happy to look into it. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, there has been some concern being raised by many of my colleagues, and I really I hope that this process is taken very seriously about this disconnect that we sometimes feel like we see, and not just between the EPA as a whole and the Corps as a whole and all of our districts. Really, I think there's some disconnect between what happens and what you think is happening out here in Washington versus what your regional offices, your district offices are actually doing on the ground. And just one of the last hearings we had with one of your deputies, Mr. Parasepi, forgive me if I've mispronounced his name. Davis is easier.
We'll call him Mr. P. It's okay.
Mr. P, perfect. I haven't gotten any feedback from him when I asked him if in this new provision, the clarification for sewage treatment facilities, if it includes above-ground individual septic system units, will they be required to get a permit?
The clarity is no, they won't.
Okay, will you please then take the extra step and call the Region 5 office and let them know that the NPDES permit...
You tricked me into this.
I tricked him too. So obviously he didn't talk with you after that. But if you could
If there's
please-
any lack of clarity, I will call.
Well, I have the frequently asked questions for the NPDES permit, and it clearly uses the Clean Water Act as the justification for asking my homeowners in many rural areas that I represent to actually apply through the EPA for this national permit, just to be able to flush their toilet. And where it disconnects with the proposed rule, the clarified rule that we've been hearing all morning, is that ditches that are excavated and have less than perennial flow are supposed to not be regulated under the Clean Water Act. That's where many of these discharges go, like in a swale between my home. And gullies and rills and non-wetland swales are not to be regulated. So you can see the disconnect and the concern that my constituents have when we see what is happening out here, what we're being told, versus what is actually in action in the district.
Well,
So
let me look at it and make
Please.
sure that there isn't more to this than meets the eye, and I'll certainly get back to you as soon as
I
can.
didn't mean to throw Mr. P under the bus with you, but I'm glad I did.
Gentlemen's time's expired.
Thank you.